When my own son told my grandchildren I wasn't welcome on Christmas, I didn't argue. I smiled, wished him well, and left something under the tree that would speak louder than I ever could. That letter sat there between the shiny wrapped presents, looking harmless. But what it held inside was the truth Adam had tried to bury for over 20 years. Truth about a hospital room, about a debt he never knew was paid, about a promise his mother made me keep until her last breath. I knew when they opened it, it wouldn't just change Christmas morning. It would shake every fragile wall Adam had built to keep me out. He thought this was about an awkward dinner. He had no idea it was about to become the Christmas his children would never forget. If you've ever been shut out by the people you love most, if you've ever been told your place at the table didn't exist anymore, stay until the end. What I wrote in that letter, and what my son confessed afterward, will make you rethink what family really means. Because sometimes, the most powerful gift you can give is the truth no one wanted to open. I'm Jack Morrison, 68 years old, retired mechanical engineer, and the kind of man who thought hard work could solve anything. For most of my life, I believed that if I provided for my family, it would be enough. I worked contracts overseas, took every shift I could get, because hospital bills don't pay themselves, especially when your wife is battling cancer. The truth is, I wasn't there for Adam the way I should have been. His mother was the warmth of the house. I was the man sending checks home from faraway cities. I told myself I'd make it up to him when things calmed down. But things never really calmed down. His mother passed 8 years ago, and the distance between Adam and me seemed to grow wider with every passing year. Adam is 40 now. He's got a family of his own, a wife named Sarah, a little girl, Lily, who's 11, and a boy, Noah, who just turned 8. They live only 20 minutes away from my place in Ohio, but it feels like another world. I've met the kids, of course, and every time I see them, it's like looking through a window into a life I'm not allowed to fully step into. After his mother died, I tried to close that distance. I paid off Adam's debts, helped him buy equipment to start his own garage, even co-signed a loan when the shop nearly went under. I thought money could fix what absence had broken. But relationships don't work like broken machines. You can't just replace a part and expect them to run the same. At first, Adam would answer my calls. They were short, polite conversations, but they were something. Over time, they became fewer. The silences longer. He stopped inviting me to birthdays. Photos of the kids' school plays came secondhand through Sarah's social media. When I dropped off gifts at the house, they were met with quick thank yous, sometimes not even from Adam. I told myself it was just life getting busy. But busy lives still make room for the people who matter. One fall afternoon, I was trimming the hedge outside my house when my neighbor, Mrs. Jensen, walked over. She's a kind old woman, never short of something to say. "I ran into your son at the store," she said, with that hesitant tone people use before saying something you might not want to hear. "He mentioned you were living out of state now. Florida, I think." I felt the clippers freeze in my hand. Florida? I hadn't left Ohio in years. "That's news to me," I said, forcing a smile. Mrs. Jensen frowned. "Oh, I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding. Kids, you know?" But I did know. Adam wasn't making mistakes. He was telling his children, "I live far away." It was easier than explaining why Grandpa didn't come around. That night, I sat in my kitchen, staring at the worn family photos pinned to my fridge. My son's wedding, Lily's first birthday, Noah's kindergarten graduation. All events I had attended in some small way, though never at the center. I was starting to realize I'd been pushed to the margins of my own family story. Still, I didn't give up. I sent letters to Lily and Noah. I mailed books with little notes scribbled on the inside covers. I called Adam every few weeks, even if it went to voicemail. His responses stayed short, formal, almost businesslike. There's a certain kind of silence that's heavier than any argument. That's what sat between Adam and me. Years of unspoken resentment. Years of my absence. Years of his hurt. I thought maybe time would heal it. But time without truth just builds walls higher. Looking back, maybe I should have forced the conversation earlier. But I told myself I was waiting for the right moment, a moment that never seemed to come. Until Christmas. A week before Christmas, I picked up the phone and dialed Adam's number. It had been months since we'd spoken beyond a quick exchange about Lily's school grades. I figured the holidays might be a good excuse to bridge the gap. "Hey, son," I said, trying to sound casual. "Christmas is coming up. I was wondering if you'd like me to come by for dinner this year. I could bring dessert. Pumpkin pie, maybe." There was a pause on the other end, long enough to make me think the call had dropped. Then Adam's voice came back, flat and careful. Yeah, we're still figuring out plans. I'll let you know." It wasn't a no, but it wasn't a yes either. I told myself not to read too much into it. Still, something about his tone felt like a closed door. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Adam. "Dad, I think it's better if you don't come this year. It might be awkward for the kids." I stared at the message for a long time. Awkward for the kids? I had raised Adam to understand that family meant showing up, even when it was awkward. I wanted to call him back, demand an explanation, but I didn't. I'd learned by now that pushing too hard only made him retreat further. The next day, my phone lit up again, but this time it was Lily. Her voice was bright, unbothered. "Grandpa, Daddy said you're traveling far away for Christmas. Are you going somewhere fun?" I froze, so that was the story. I couldn't bring myself to correct her. I just said, "Something like that, sweetheart. I'll be thinking of you." That evening, as I was nursing a cup of coffee, my phone rang again. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. "Jack," she said softly when I answered. "I'm sorry about Christmas. Adam's, well, he's not in a good place right now. But I want you to know, I'll try to arrange a time for you to see the kids. Just, please don't tell Adam I called." Her voice was strained, like someone stuck between loyalty and guilt. I promised her I wouldn't say a word, though my stomach twisted at the thought that seeing my own grandchildren had become a covert operation. Later that night, as I sat alone in my living room, I began to think back to the years when Adam was just a boy. That's when the cracks really started to show. I remembered overhearing him once, years ago, telling a friend, "My dad left me and Mom to chase his job." It wasn't entirely wrong. I had left, physically. I took every out-of-town project I could to cover the endless hospital bills. But it was never about escaping them. It was about keeping the lights on and the medicine coming. The truth Adam never knew, and I realize now he still doesn't, is that I took those jobs because his mother asked me to. She didn't want Adam to see how sick she was getting. She wanted him to keep going to school, to live like nothing was wrong. But Adam saw my absence, not my reasons. And maybe that's the cruelest part. Children don't see the sacrifices you make in silence. They just feel the empty chair at the dinner table. As I sat there, the pieces began to click together in a way I didn't like. Adam's resentment wasn't just stubbornness. It was built on a story he had carried since childhood. And the worst part was, I'd never told him the truth. I looked at my phone, wondering if now, decades later, was finally the time to tell him. But how do you start that conversation? Son, the reason I wasn't around is because I was trying to save your mother's life. I put the phone down. It didn't feel like he would hear me. Not now. Not in a week, when Christmas came and went without me. Still, one thought stayed in my mind. Maybe Adam's anger wasn't as simple as I'd believed. And maybe, just maybe, the letter I would leave under that tree could finally start a conversation we should have had years ago. 2 days before Christmas, Adam called me. Not a text, not a voicemail, but a call. For a brief second, I allowed myself to believe he'd changed his mind, that maybe Sarah had talked to him, or maybe he'd thought it over. But hope has a cruel way of getting ahead of reality. Dad, he said, I need to be clear this time. Don't come by. It's not just about the kids. It's about us. I don't want you in our lives right now. You're not part of this family anymore. There was no anger in his voice, no shouting, just cold finality. I see, I said, holding back the sudden weight in my chest. He didn't offer anything else, just hung up. I sat there in my kitchen, staring at the wall, letting those words echo. You're not part of this family anymore. I could have let it end there. I thought about it, just staying home, pretending it was any other day. But then I imagined Lily and Noah growing up with only one side of the story. One day, they'd ask why Grandpa wasn't around, and all they'd have were Adam's explanations, filtered through pain and misunderstanding. They deserved more than that. That night, Sarah called again. Her voice was softer this time, like she'd been crying. I didn't know he'd say that to you, she whispered. I'm sorry, Jack. I really am. I'm not angry, I said. Just tired. She hesitated. There's something you should know. Adam's garage. It's not doing well. He's been hiding it, even from me. I only found out when I noticed bills piling up. He's drowning in debt, and I think he's ashamed, especially when he thinks about all the help you gave him before. It made a cruel kind of sense. Adam had always taken pride in being independent, in proving he could stand on his own. My presence, my support, probably felt like a spotlight on everything he hadn't achieved. Still, I couldn't change the past, and I couldn't fix Adam's ego, but I could give my grandchildren something that might outlast the bitterness. The next morning, I sat at my desk with a pen and a stack of paper. I took a breath and began to write. Dear Lily and Noah, I wrote as if I were speaking to them years from now. Older, wiser, ready to hear things they weren't yet old enough to understand. I told them about their grandmother, about how strong she was, how brave. I told them how I worked far from home, not because I wanted to leave, but because I needed to provide what insurance wouldn't. I described nights in dimly lit hospital rooms, the way their dad would fall asleep on her lap during chemo treatments, the way she smiled at me when the pain was unbearable, but still said, "Tell Adam I'm okay." I told them how proud I was of their father, how much I wished he could see that. And then I added one line, simple but sharp. Someday, you will learn why your father stopped speaking to me. When you do, remember, It wasn't because I stopped loving you. I didn't want to turn them against Adam. That wasn't the point. But they needed to know that love hadn't vanished. It had simply been pushed out of sight. I folded the pages, slipped them into a plain envelope, and wrote, "To Lily and Noah. Open when ready," on the front. That night, I drove to their house. Lights twinkled in the windows. I could see silhouettes moving inside. Sarah, the kids, maybe Adam. I didn't knock. I walked around to the front porch, knelt beside the tree they'd set up near the window, and gently slid the envelope beneath the branches, nestled between bright boxes and glittering boughs. Then I walked away, down the driveway, into the cold December night, hoping that someday, when the time was right, that letter would find its way into the right hands. Christmas morning came like any other for them, I imagine. Lily and Noah tearing through wrapping paper, Sarah trying to keep order, Adam trying to keep everything on schedule. And then Lily spotted the envelope. It wasn't wrapped. It didn't have a bow. And it wasn't from the pile of gifts Adam and Sarah had arranged. She pulled it out, turned it over in her hands, and saw the writing on the front. To Lily and Noah, open when ready. Can we open it now? She asked, holding it up. Adam frowned. Where did that come from? I don't know, Lily said, already sliding a finger under the flap. Sarah started to say something, but it was too late. Lily unfolded the first page and began to read aloud. The room went quiet. Her voice, small but steady, filled the living room with words I had written in the stillness of my own kitchen. About her grandmother, about the nights in the hospital, about the reasons I had been away. Noah leaned against Sarah, listening intently. Sarah's eyes were wet. Adam's jaw tightened with every sentence. When Lily reached the line, "Someday, you will learn why your father stopped speaking to me. When you do, remember, it wasn't because I stopped loving you." Adam stood abruptly. "This is manipulation," he snapped. "Classic Jack, always playing the victim, always twisting things to make himself look noble." Sarah looked at him, something shifting in her face. "Adam, that's not true. Jack isn't lying. I've seen the hospital bills he paid for your mom. I saw them years ago, before we were even married." Adam froze. "What are you talking about?" "I mean it," Sarah said firmly. "Your dad spent years covering costs you didn't even know about. Maybe you should ask yourself why you never heard the full story." The room felt heavier than the snow outside. Adam grabbed his coat and left without another word. Later that afternoon, Sarah bundled Lily and Noah into the car. They pulled up in front of my house just as I was setting out a plate of reheated lasagna for dinner. I opened the door to see Lily rushing toward me, throwing her arms around my waist. "Grandpa," she said into my coat, "I read your letter." Sarah smiled sadly. "They wanted to see you. And I thought maybe you should hear the other side of this." We sat in my living room, the faint sound of a carol station playing in the background. Sarah took a deep breath. "Adam, he's angry because he thinks you didn't tell him about his mom's illness soon enough. He felt blindsided when she passed. He always thought he had more time, and when he didn't, he blamed you for keeping him in the dark." I felt my chest tighten. "He doesn't know." Sarah looked puzzled. "Know what?" I leaned back, the memories rushing in. "He doesn't know it was her decision. She made me promise not to tell him how bad it was. She didn't want him watching her fade. She wanted him to remember her strong, not sick. She was terrified that if he knew, he'd drop out of school, give up his own life to take care of her. She wouldn't allow it. Sarah's eyes widened. And you kept that promise? I did, I said quietly. Even when it killed me to stay quiet. Even when it meant Adam thought I didn't care. I thought one day I'd explain it to him. But one day kept getting further away. Lily looked up at me, her brow furrowed. So Daddy's mad because he doesn't know the truth? I smiled gently at her. Sometimes people get angry when they only see half the story. It doesn't make them bad. It just means they're hurting. Sarah nodded slowly. I think he needs to hear that. But he's not ready today. I knew she was right. But for the first time in a long time, I felt something that almost resembled hope. Maybe the letter had cracked something open. Not just in Lily and Noah, but in Adam too. It was 2 days after Christmas when I saw Adam's truck pull into my driveway. I hadn't expected him. His visits had become rare enough to count on one hand over the last decade. He didn't knock right away. He sat in the truck for a long minute, engine idling, before finally stepping out. His shoulders were hunched, his expression unreadable. When I opened the door, he looked at me like he wasn't sure whether to come in or turn back. Adam, I said, keeping my voice even, come on in. It's cold out there. He stepped inside, glancing around the living room like he was seeing it for the first time in years. His eyes landed briefly on the framed photo of his mother on the mantel, then shifted back to me. I read the letter, he said quietly. I nodded. I figured you would. For a moment, he just stood there. Then he said something I never expected. Is there something you never told me? About Mom? The question hit harder than I was prepared for. I'd rehearsed answers to his anger, to his accusations, but not to an honest question. Sit down, I said, motioning toward the couch. He hesitated, then sank into the cushions. His hands were clenched, his eyes fixed on the floor. There's a lot I didn't tell you, I began slowly. Not because I wanted to lie to you, but because your mother made me promise. His head jerked up. Promise what? I got up and went to the old cedar box I kept in my bedroom. Inside, wrapped in yellowed paper, was an envelope I hadn't opened in 8 years. I came back and set it on the coffee table. This, I said, is from your mother. She wrote it a few weeks before she passed. Adam stared at it like it might burn him. His hand shook slightly as he picked it up and slid a finger under the flap. The letter was short. That was just her way, straight to the point. Adam, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I know you're angry with your father. You've always felt like he wasn't there. But I need you to know something. I asked him not to tell you how sick I was. I didn't want you to give up your life to take care of me. I wanted you to finish school, to live like you still had time. It wasn't his choice to be away. It was mine. Please don't carry this anger for the rest of your life. It will only hurt you. Love, Mom. Adam's lips trembled as he read, his eyes scanning the page again and again. His breathing grew heavier until finally he set the letter down and pressed his palms over his face. I spent years hating you, he said, his voice breaking. I thought you abandoned us. I thought, all those nights, I thought it was because you didn't care. I know, I said quietly. And I let you think that. Because I promised her I wouldn't tell you. It was the hardest promise I've ever kept. He looked at me then, eyes wet and raw. I've been so wrong. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the hum of the old heater. Adam sat there, shoulders shaking, tears slipping down his face. I'm sorry, Dad, he said finally. I don't even know how to make it right. I leaned back, letting his words settle. I'd waited decades to hear them, but they didn't feel like a finish line. They felt like the starting line of a race we hadn't run in years. I'm not ready to just pretend the last 20 years didn't happen, I said gently. You were angry. You shut me out, and I can't just erase that overnight. Adam nodded slowly, his hands twisting in his lap. I know. I don't expect you to. What I do want, I continued, is to take small steps. Not for some perfect happy ending, but because we're still here. And your kids deserve to see what family can look like when people try. Adam let out a shaky breath, then gave a short nod. I want that too. I don't want them growing up thinking it's normal to cut people off without ever asking why. For the first time in years, we looked at each other without the weight of accusation between us. There was no sudden surge of forgiveness, no dramatic embrace, just a quiet understanding that something had shifted. Before he left, Adam picked up the letter from his mother and slipped it back into the envelope. He held it carefully, like it was something fragile. I'll bring the kids by soon, he said. Maybe we could just have dinner. Nothing big. I nodded. Dinner sounds good. As I watched him walk back to his truck, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and relief. The wound was still there, but for the first time, it didn't feel like it was festering. For the first time in years, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we were on our way to healing. It wasn't Christmas when Adam called again. It was just a regular Tuesday evening, a week into the new year. Dad, he said over the phone, his voice steady but tentative. Sarah's making lasagna Thursday night. The kids would like it if you came by. Just nothing big. Just dinner. I paused, letting the words sink in. For years, the thought of being invited over had been something I didn't dare expect. Now, here it was, ordinary, quiet, and maybe more meaningful than if it had been Christmas dinner. I'll be there, I said simply. Thursday evening, I drove to Adam's house. The driveway was lined with patches of ice, the porch light warm against the cold air. When I stepped inside, I could smell garlic and tomatoes from the kitchen. Sarah greeted me with a smile. Lily and Noah came running, and for the first time in a long while, there was no hesitation in their hug. Adam was at the table, setting plates. He glanced up when I entered, offering a small nod. Not a grand gesture, not an embrace, but it was enough. Dinner wasn't perfect. There were awkward silences, moments when conversation drifted into neutral topics, weather, work, the kids' school projects. But there was also laughter when Noah told a story about his science experiment gone wrong, and Lily proudly showed me a drawing she'd made of the family, me included. I sat at that table, listening to the sound of forks against plates, Sarah's occasional laughter, the kids' chatter, and Adam's quieter voice. It wasn't the kind of dinner you see in commercials, but it was real. And it was more than I'd had in years. After dinner, Sarah brought out dessert, and Lily insisted I take the biggest piece. You missed Christmas cake, she said, so this makes up for it. Adam stayed mostly quiet, but every so often, I caught him looking at me with an expression that wasn't anger anymore, something closer to reflection. When dinner was over, I stood by the door, getting ready to leave. Lily hugged me tightly. Noah followed, and Sarah said, "Don't be a stranger, Jack. The kids want you around." Adam walked me to the porch. He didn't say much at first, just stood there with his hands in his pockets. Then he said, "Thanks for coming. We'll We'll do this again. I nodded. I'd like that. Weeks passed, and the dinners became more frequent. Not every week, but enough to notice a change. We didn't dive into the heavy stuff every time. Sometimes we didn't talk about the past at all. But the silence was different now. Not a wall, but a space where trust could grow back. Slowly. One evening, while the kids were in the living room working on a puzzle, Adam and I found ourselves alone in the kitchen. You know, I said quietly, making amends isn't about a single dinner. It's a process, a long one. I'm not expecting everything to be fixed overnight. Adam nodded, eyes on the counter. I know, I want to try. I don't want to lose more years over something I didn't understand. I smiled faintly. Then we're moving in the right direction. A few nights later, Adam called me over again. This time, when I arrived, there was something different in the air. After dinner, he disappeared into the bedroom for a moment and came back carrying a long, worn case. I think this belongs to you, he said, setting it on the table. I recognized it instantly. My old guitar. The one I used to play for his mother late at night. The one I'd taught Adam a few chords on when he was a teenager. I thought he'd sold it years ago. I found it in the garage, he said. Thought maybe you'd want it back. I opened the case. The wood was a little scratched, the strings old, but it was still my guitar. I strummed it gently, the sound filling the room with a soft, familiar warmth. Remember Silent Night? Adam asked, his voice almost shy. I smiled. I remember. Lily and Noah wandered over, curious. Play it, Grandpa, Lily said. So I did. My fingers stumbled at first, but then the melody came back. Adam picked up a harmony quietly, just like he used to. Sarah hummed along, and Lily's small voice carried the words. For the first time in years, we weren't talking about the past. We weren't arguing over what had been done or left unsaid. We were just here, together. When the song ended, there was a quiet moment where no one moved. Adam looked at me, and for the first time, there wasn't distance in his eyes, just a quiet understanding. Christmas hadn't been perfect. The years behind us were still full of hurt, and the road ahead wasn't guaranteed to be smooth. But as I packed up my guitar that night, I realized something. Forgiveness isn't a holiday. It's not marked by a single date on the calendar. It's built moment by moment, dinner by dinner, song by song. And maybe, just maybe, this was our beginning.